Howdy, it's another Perimeter Fires conversation. This is one I've been looking forward to getting to you for weeks. It's one with Colonel Carlos Tamez, fighting Texas Aggie class of 1990, and out of the Corps of Cadets, a fighting Texas Aggie Red Pot. Uh, in prior conversations, there was a ramp up period as we got into the conversation to the part that you hear. This wasn't like that. Colonel Tamez hit the ground running, saying things that motivate, inspire, and surprise. And you'll see, it'll be plainly obvious. I was very quickly put into an adapt and overcome situation. And we got it squared away. But what's important is that every last word from Colonel Tamez is immaculate and outstanding. And I'm just really looking forward to sharing this with you. We're going to start with Colonel Tamez responding to me just telling him that I had just gotten off the phone with a mutual friend, an outstanding Aggie, Jimmy Henderson. I had called Jimmy to see if he had any dirt on Colonel Tamez. And yeah, so let's take it from there. Perimeter Fires, Conversation 4, Colonel Carlos Tamez. Gig 'em.
Uh-oh. Jimmy. It was, yeah, it was pretty neat. This past football, well, no, I guess it was final review. Yeah, we're getting ready for final review. He's walking across the quad with his daughter, and yeah, just a beautiful little thing. And so my wife and I are standing there, and our boy, he's in E1, getting ready, for the second go round at final review, and he comes up to me and he just yells across the quad. And of course, Jimmy has this distinct voice that once you hear him, it's just like, everybody's like, "Who's that?" I said, I didn't even turn around. I said, "That's Jimmy, man." He comes up to me, gives me a hug, man. He's a wonderful person, man. He's a really really good guy. His whole class. I mean, whom better to hand off the whole fire operation than to his class, red ass class.
Clearly, there's respect and admiration for that class and those leaders that would follow. And so, referencing a story that I know from that time, and there are many stories to be sure, but this is one that I know, of a moment that happened that was pivotal to a lot of people. And if you ask everybody else, they considered Jimmy Henderson the prime mover on it. And if you ask Jimmy, it was everybody else, as if almost like it sort of just happened. But as Carlos Tamez would say,
It doesn't just happen.
so then what is the role of the prime mover, and what does that look like?
So my boy was David Kane, and David, he was much bigger than me, big old dude, but he just has this personality, and still to this day, his personality is very much like you just love to be around him, and when CTs would come around and try to order non-regs around, the non-regs would just have a blast at these jerps, walking the stack, trying to get them to do stuff. But when you have folks like Jimmy and David Kane, he just turn around and you would just like, well, just because it's you, David, and folks would get stuff done, and it's just they didn't have that real hardcore, Steve Moore, which was in my class, Dr. Moore now. Uh, Steve was intense. He was just a monster. You did stuff because, well, Steve said so. But folks like David Kane and Jimmy, when they told you to do something, it's just like it's just you just love them, you know, and and part of that camaraderie, crossing lines and crossing classes, you just feel real proud that those are the guys that were getting stuff done. You know, it's pretty special, pretty special.
So now we're into a train of thought on the subject of leadership that I've always been interested in. And at this point, I can't conveniently let my apology to the inimitable Dr. Chris Townsend fall off the record for a technical issue. So once again, I'm sorry, Dr. Chris. I know I was a headache on this subject. But the question being, is leadership something that can be taught and created from whole cloth? Or is it something that requires a bit of an art that has to kind of be there along with an appetite to take it to the next level? And that was the question that I put to Colonel Tamez.
I truly believe that people have it. People have it in them. And I think there are instances in, now having been through, a good level of experiences, and having seen folks rise up to levels that, had they not been given that opportunity, you would have never known that they had it in them. Whether it be charisma or just downright, follow me and I'll show you the way type of person. But if they never had the opportunity, then maybe you'd never seen that. And I think that a lot of people have it in them. And if they've never had the opportunity to be in a role like we got to do, you might never have seen that. And then you have others that probably struggled with it. And then it just, something clicks. And then they became, they got to step in a role that was, a million times bigger than they were. So I think we got to see both, to answer your question. I think we got to see both types of folks. I think probably one of the most awesome things about this is you didn't have to do it by yourself. You had other buddies to lean on. And, those are the guys that forever and a day, you can pick up the phone and say, hey, this and this and this. And those are the guys that come running to help you out.
So if the theory is that there's something there, my question to Colonel Tamez at this point was there something there that you knew about, that you had, that you wanted to bring to the table to execute against this great undertaking?
So let me preface that before I answer that question. Back in the mid '80s, coming from South Texas, you either stuck around here and you went to a trade school and you stayed here, and or you went and worked, someplace in a factory, and then you never came back, or you went off to school. And I was fortunate enough that before it was, I think it was my junior year in high school. A real good friend of my dad's, Dr. Ben Villalon, worked for the Ag Extension Service, or the Experiment Station rather, here in Weslaco. Big Aggie, I don't know how many degrees from A&M. All his kids, they all went to A&M. I mean, just a huge Aggie family. And he asked me, he says, hey, we got an extra ticket for the A&M TSIP game. You want to go? Never really left the valley. And I was like, wow, sure, yeah. So, we went. And that just transformed the way I looked at going to going to college, because no one had ever really said, "Hey, you're going to college." So it had to come from within, right? And from that point on, I never looked any other place. Of course, we all filled out applications to go elsewhere, but that was the one place that I really wanted to go after that. And so, and the whole deal was just make it past your first semester. Just make it past your first semester. And then joining the Corps, I drove myself up there, and I actually parked at the Trigon. I was about to get towed, and they were like, "Well, what are you doing here?" I was like, "Well, I'm coming to see about the Corps." Long-haired mullet, They're looking at me like, "Well, you can't park here." Well, yes, I can. I'm coming to learn about the Corps, and. So anyway, I walk into the Trigon there, and just one captain says, "Well, where are you from?" So I'm from South Texas. Oh, San Antonio? I just chuckle. No, like deep South Texas. And, of course, he puts two and two together. Hispanic, South Texas. Oh, I know exactly where to take you. So he took me to Squadron 6. Had the largest number of Hispanics, in the entire Corps. There was 11 of us in the Corps. And 6 of them were in Squadron 6. So I went there, and that's where I met some of those guys that would later be my upperclassmen. And I had no idea who they were. I didn't know where they were from. Knowing that later they were from McAllen and so forth. But the long and the short with that is, that was my way up, and that was my way out. And I think one of the neatest things is getting around guys or folks that are squared away. Number one, number two, are running hard to get to the next level, whatever the next level was for them. Whether it be in the Corps or going off to medical school or law school or stuff like that. You're looking at, well, I'm supposed to do, what I'm doing right now is the bare minimum of what I'm supposed to do. But having guys like that you could, look up to and run towards is what I thought made it. I thought it was hard, but it made it easy to hang on to the idea that, I could be like those guys. Whatever that means, being like those guys. So, and then getting introduced to, Aggie Bonfire and the whole leadership thing, no one really talked about that. You didn't know unless you were in. And so that was a whole culture, Of course, my outfit, was a bonfire outfit, big time. And what I thought was even more wonderful about that is we had, Red Pot in our outfit. And, so we got to see that. And then I got to see more of that years following when it came for selection and all that stuff. But it was, wow, it was a culture that was like, well, where was this?
So at this point, I'm excited. He's asking, where was this? And I'm like, where was what? There's so much meat on that bone. Bonfire, tradition, legacy. What was the thing? If you can even nail it down to one, what was the thing that was capturing the heart and mind?
So, of course, if you were even aspiring to become an Aggie, or if you grew up in it, everybody knew what Aggie Bonfire was at that time. But if you weren't, then you kind of went through that experience as you, as you get introduced, right? To me, what I didn't know much about was Aggie Bonfire when of course, as a fish, I was recalling the other day where our upperclassmen would tell, when push was about to start, our upperclassmen would tell us, it's kind of one of those things, push is going to start, it's 24 hours, blah, blah, blah. Don't you dare get caught, one of those, don't you dare get caught out there after CQ, after, your mandatory study hours. And then, kind of on the other side, hey, but if you do go, it's pretty red ass, type of deal. So, of course, all my buddies and I would wait till lights out, and then we'd sneak out and be out there all night long. And it was like, this is just a big old party. And we were going to be working for 6 hours, but wow, push. And then hey, we're going to do it again tomorrow night. Hey, we're going to do it again tomorrow night, and so forth like that. So again, a culture that unless you were there, you had no idea that it even existed. And so, and then you start looking into the guys that you see running around stack, telling you what to do, pick this up, move that log here. And because fish weren't allowed on stack, or we weren't, we had to earn our way up there. But where did this come from? And like I mentioned, we were fortunate enough. We had my freshman year, we had a junior red pot in our outfit, and he was still very charismatic, very huge heart, my guerra. And he would come around us all the time. He would come around us and say, hey, you guys, when you get out there, look for this or do that. And of course, we'd see him out there all the time. And so little by little, you're getting introduced to something that unless you're looking for it, you don't see it. You don't see an opportunity to be, somebody like him. And that's to be a junior red pot and stuff like that. So, of course, the grind for that selection, your sophomore year, you had to be putting out bigger than Dallas, to even be considered. And so, and then you meet all these old guys. They all show up and they're like, and of course, some of these guys, we remember them because they were seniors when we were fish. And we all got to know them because, our outfit did a lot of bonfire stuff. And then they come back when you're a junior, when you're a sophomore, you get selected. And then you're like, oh, okay, wow, look at this. It was just this big old underground leadership lab, if you would, that I thought was extremely intense. And even more so, drove the leadership side of it. Whether you had it in you or not, it was going to come out. And so, my opinion.
Now, this will be the last time that I have to jump in like this. We get the adapt and overcome thing figured out here in a second. But at this point in the conversation, I'm struck by the nature of the mutual respect and admiration between Colonel Tamez and all of his contemporaries. And this is me just grasping at straws, trying to figure out if there was any moment that he can think of, any setting that might have set all this into motion between everybody, and how that might have played out.
Getting to cut site, and then that whole load part. There was a couple of outfits, and there was our sister outfits in the Corps. And so we usually work together, 6, 13, B1. And and then of course it was understood that once you're done loading, for that cut weekend, we get over to, back then it was Duncan Field. We get over to the stack site, and then the trucks would come in, and then we would start positioning logs, to be able to, for them to top or prep them to go up on stack, right? And so, that I think the majority of what as a stack pot, we weren't spending that much time out at the cut site because where all other buddies were doing all of that. We'd go to the load, the outfits that were loading, and then we'd come back to the stack because we had to receive the trucks and stuff like that. And I think that's where when you start putting the two together, the trucks coming in and positioning the logs to be able to, and then you see folks that were standouts, leading a crew of whomever, getting on logs and then, giving the commands and everything. And then one log turned into 200 logs and they were still there. And I think that was one of the things that impressed me about the guys behind us, David Kane, Jimmy, and, those guys. It just, they had it. They had it. No, you didn't have to go develop it. They just had it. Now, what developed among them, as buddies, which is one of the things that I thought, because you with junior reds and reds, it's kind of hard to not be. In a sense, we were all type A's. That's why you got picked, because you got stuff done. And then you get a room full of type A's, and then there's personalities that you had to deal with. You know what I mean? I mean, you were there.
Right.
So it was, but being the mature, because this thing was a million times bigger than us, and you had to know your place. You had to know what you had to do, and that's part of leadership too. Knowing when to be the best follower until it was your time to be the leader.
Right.
And
well said.
Yeah.
Well, I asked about when you met Jimmy because Jimmy was saying that his memory of you being ahead of him was that, I guess before you became a junior Red Pot, he said that you were one of the funniest people he ever met. And he also said that you flipped your lid when you learned that he knew Spanish. And
Yeah.
he said you had a field day with that.
Yeah.
And then he said you became a junior, and of course he said you were still, great as a junior. He said, but you had the ability to switch to bad bull pretty quickly. That turn that magic on. Which I confess, I kind of operated on that probably a little bit too much if you ask some people, but which is to say it's not a bad thing. But all of that, I mean, you're engaging as a member of the Corps of Cadets on a trajectory to join the military and serve in the Army. You're working with non-regs. In this case, Jimmy. What was that dynamic? Discovering this world outside of the Corps.
Dealing with non-regs is, I think, what made the whole experience real, and really what I think really drove the whole purpose of being a leader inside of this Aggie Bonfire organization. The Corps is just a very small piece of the Aggie community. We all know that. It's just a small piece of it. And then you have this other big piece of the pie that's everything else. And you could take two routes. You could be, that traditional Corps turd jerk that sometimes non-regs thought that's, well, this guy's in the Corps. They know one thing is, be in the Corps. Or you could try to relate. And I think, you just see non-regs out there doing the same thing you want to do, is it build Aggie Bonfire. Build something Aggie. It doesn't matter if it was Bonfire or not. It was just building something Aggie, and you had the same common goal. And to me, what made it really, what made it worthwhile was just sitting there and talking to, especially when I was a JERP, is sitting there talking to a whole group of non-regs, and just the stories that they're experiencing going to A&M. Really not unlike yours. I mean, we all went to the same classes.
Yeah.
You just donned a uniform, but everything else was the same. And so you quickly realize, what I thought was separating me from the rest of this, Aggie world is really uniting me to the rest of this Aggie world. They looked at us
Right.
like, you guys are the ones in uniform, so you better be doing things right. But man, you could be a jerk because you're the rah rah rah, in uniform, and you had to know when to turn that off. And I think that was probably one of the coolest things, is getting to turn that off and not
Right.
being the guy in uniform all the time. And to
Right.
me, that's what was fulfilling, is I didn't have to be that guy in uniform all the time. And then you see them
Right.
on campus, and they're like, "Hey, what's going on?" And they look at you, man. Well, you cleaned up pretty well, because we all had
Right.
those days. But so and one of the other things that I thought was probably most fulfilling, or very fulfilling, especially being a JERP, was quietly. When stack was going on, you'd quietly kind of, like a house cat, just kind of work your way up into a perimeter fire and just hear all the
Right.
stories going on, and they had no idea you were standing there. And then
Right.
and then you just kind of say something, and they're like, but you know I remember doing that kind of stuff, and it's just, I mean, I don't know, pretty cool.
It's fun, like those things, those techniques that aren't even taught. No senior ever says, "All right, so you need to learn how to sneak up on people." you just you figure it out every generation.
Yeah,
It is fun, and I mean, hell, I still do it now. Just see what people are saying. Um,
yeah,
it's just now they're saying it about other people, which is fun.
yeah,
But no, I mean, there's so much there. Uh, one of the things I was talking to Jimmy about, I've talked to lots of people about it, is there's this interesting thing that happens where I know I felt it. I've seen it in generations since. It feels like, I don't want to say it's easier, but maybe it feels like maybe more common for members of the Corps to walk away from their experience with non-reg Red Pot leadership saying, I respect that guy. I like that guy. Great guy. It seems like that happens more often than the other way around. The 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 core Red Pot winding up with these great relationships with non-regs. And that's not saying anything about any members of the Corps that don't have that happen in leadership. It just goes to what you say. Some folks have got to know how to turn it off and say, you're in a different environment. Enjoy this environment that you're in, which is different than the one that you live in on campus. And the ones that can do that have that wonderful experience of, it's liberating. Nobody else is going to get that chance to lead and lead non-regs in the trenches. It's fun, but you've just got to open your mind to a different way of approaching it. As a non-reg, it's just hard to get in the frame of mind of operating core units. But when you do, it's almost like they're surprised. Like, oh, how'd you do that? That's a magic trick. That's fun. And there's nowhere else on campus where you can do that, where you have those functioning fully, all the gears meshing, Hart Hall with their weirdness, moving logs with, it's always been that way. It still is.
Yeah.
Still, the Corps got their impressions of non-regs until they go work with them. You hear the impressions of the members of the Corps who don't build Bonfire about what they think of non-regs. It's very different than those that have built Bonfire for a while. And I think a lot of that is because one of the closest dorms to the Corps is Hart. So the Corps is like, oh, they must all be like this. But there's just lead in the pipes. That's all it is.
That's all it is. Yeah, it's just my son just finished his freshman year. He was in the Corps, he's in the Corps. He's in the Corps. He's an E1, and just as it is, everybody goes into A&M, whether you've been indoctrinated over a number of generations and now it's your turn, or you've never been there and now you're there, but and what's this Corps thing? Well, I don't want to do that because I don't want to join the military, so I'm not going to go in the Corps, and which is a huge misnomer in itself, because yet again, 1 in 10 or less than that go into the military. They're in their other form of leadership lab. They wanted to be an Aggie and they wanted to join the Corps.
Right.
And they have no intentions of joining the military, but they want to be an Aggie. They want to be in the Corps and blah blah blah. Right. So one of the things, of course, and they all come in like they're drinking through a fire hose. It's just this big old
Right.
A&M thing is overwhelming, especially the fall. And you know how that goes. It's just a lot. And so just little by little, of course, my daughter went there and, would go up there and my son would he saw everything. He's just real quiet, watching, observing, hearing all the stories. And, it's kind of one of those, the older I got, the better I am, just the stories are just grand. Well, one of the things I told him just little by little was get off the quad. Get off the quad and go meet other people. Go get involved in your college. He's a construction science guy.
Right.
And you're going to find that those people, the non-regs, they're no different than you. They're just not wearing a uniform. And their goals are just like yours. And so there is no separation, and you gotta find that sweet spot of, they're Aggies just like you, and try to learn from them, just like they're going to be looking at you like, well, you're in the Corps, wow, it's, you're intense, you're, and don't be that guy, just drop it down and get to know some of those guys, and next thing you know. So that's speaking in generalities. Until folks decide to do that, there is not this. Well, it's the Corps. Well, it's the non-regs. But us at Aggie Bonfire, we know better, and we've known better because we've had to operate in a big old gray area, and that's that big old gray area was building this thing was 1,000,000 times bigger than us. So.
Well, and it teaches you, that whole process teaches you a valuable lesson over the rest of your life in the reward of learning to live in and respect and embrace something completely different than the life that you go back home to. And you learn, it can be kind of scary to respect somebody else's paradigm if you've never done it before, because you think, oh, well, it's going to rub off on me, or I'm going to be less good at what it is that I love, or I'm going to compromise this, that, or the other thing. But Bonfire teaches you in working with other communities that, yeah, you respect their community more, you understand it more. The things that kind of make you ask questions about why are they the way they are, well, now you have answers to that, and you understand that there's a methodology to the way they are, and you can respect that and work with it. But then you go back home to what you have, and you love it even more than you did before you went out.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Um, it, it's one of those, unless you've been there, um, you don't understand it. But
Mm.
when you've been there and you do understand it in an overwhelming way, and you tell that story to folks that, wow, I never heard it that way. It's one of those, like I said earlier, being open to it, and then, what is it that this thing is going to do for me long term, but it's not what it ends up doing. It's not what you end up getting to do. It's what it does to you. And it's just,
Right.
it just, fills you with a sense of pride that, somebody who can have that much pride into something and then turn right around and then share that with others, whether you're in the Corps, non-reg. Um, I mean, it's overwhelming in its own sense, but I think more importantly, I mean, it portrays one aspect of being an Aggie, but this whole Aggie thing is so much bigger than all of us, you know, um, which I think is wonderful. Whether you're a first generation, third generation, whatever, you were in the Corps, you weren't in the Corps, who really cares?
Right.
But that one that thing, that Aggie Bonfire thing, man, is what pulled everybody together.
Right. And in such a way that's so essential and boiled down. Like I remember when we were doing our thing, those humble beginnings off campus for the first time, and comparing these notes in our mind of what we believed was the case, what we believed had always been the case, and then always wonder, well, God, are we doing enough? Is it working? Is it, because we've only got a few hundred people out in the woods on a weekend, and eventually you get to stack, and there's only a couple hundred people out here working the shift, and constantly, like, it used to be thousands. There'd be thousands at all times working together, and that first, I think it was Chip. It might have been Chip Steele, um, who was the first to go, guys, like, it was on a good night, it was hundreds. You got a campus of tens of thousands. On a good night, it was hundreds. You know, it was never crawling with thousands and thousands of people. It's always a small handful that have that in them to do that work, regardless of how many people you have on campus. And if you saw thousands, it was because it was way back when it was mandatory. And then in talking to those guys since, they'll say we had to drag them out of their beds. Not everybody wanted to do it. So that few hundreds of people, that core group that never goes away, while other people jump in and out over a season, that small group from core and non-reg can have such a huge impact on the entire campus says a lot about the endeavor. because it's not just the thing that they're building. There's that spirit, and it's infectious, and it infects an entire season on campus, and the spirit of the student body in the stands, and saying howdy, walking to classes, and all of that stuff. That comes from an essential few with this insane hobby on the weekends.
Yeah, just hearing about it, and hearing about it and seeing things from afar. I can't say I can relate to that time. Um, when things changed for Aggie Bonfire. What I and that in itself right there was a huge challenge. And I guess it's an ongoing challenge. But yet again, I mean, if there's anybody who's going to get it done, it's going to be a group of Aggies. So it just meant that times changed a little bit, and what great change has occurred. We've advanced in the way everything is built now and so forth. But what hasn't changed is still Aggies working together for something that's a million times greater than they are. And it's just things changed a little bit. So.
Yeah, I was talking to a head stack from 2016, a few years back. I was talking to him yesterday, and Bonfire is just every year there's something. There's one thing that you hang your hat on is the curveball, and sometimes it comes in October, November, which is the worst. But I'm pretty sure we got our curveball yesterday, and I was telling him, man, every year there's something that just to anybody else would seem insurmountable. Like, oh, back it up, not going to happen. But to Bonfire, it's like you get excited. What is their creative solution to this going to be? But I told him, I said, me having nothing else to do now, no. I don't say how things are done, nothing. My job is just to help them. And then they ask me questions and they figure out the answer to the question while they're asking me. And I just, I don't have anything to do. Even so, the first year where we make it all the way through and there's not a problem, I'm going to throw in the towel. I'm done. That's it. It's over. It's just for me, meaning, well, they've figured it out. But he actually put it really well. He said, yeah, throw in the towel because it's not Aggie Bonfire anymore. That's true. There's going to be something every year. What was y'all's big challenge as starting with junior year? What was the big thing that you faced that at the time you were thinking, oh, what? How do we do this?
I don't know that it was one particular thing. I just know that my class, I think we were a pretty eclectic class. We had a group of folks that had a lot of savvy and how to network, how to reach, and some people were very comfortable in reaching out to the guys that the money folks and the resource folks.
Right.
And then you had the others who were like, you know what, just hand that off to me. I'll go get the tractors, or I'll go get the, or jump in the truck and let's drive to, wherever, Texas, because we got to, get these up. Or the guys that were very good at, getting on the phone and calling in the trucks and all this stuff. And then there was others that were just like watching, like, where am I going to fit in on this thing? Because I got to jump in somewhere because, my dad says or my granddad says, you got to do this. I don't think there was any one thing for us leading up to in our junior year um, that that could that could have been a showstopper.
Mm.
I think for us it happened our senior year, and and this is very unpopular, and we all kind of try real hard to just forget that this ever really happened, but it
Mm.
happened. Um, we started a feud with the BQs,
Right.
and then the next year, BQs weren't allowed on Duncan Field,
Hmm.
and it just it divided. But you have one BQ who takes it upon himself, to throw his torch on the fire,
Right.
and probably never went and worked a day on the bonfire at all.
Right. Because it's those people that don't know the rules.
Sure. And but he knew. Yeah. So I think for us, it was kind of there was a lasting impression there that turned out to be, and to everybody else, again, if you're just showing up to Aggie Bonfire that night, it was gorgeous. It was beautiful.
Right.
We beat the
Right.
Sips. It was what it was supposed to be. The experience. I mean, who ever gets to do this? Tony Godinez was my old lady. He was head stack. He and
Mm.
I were at the top of stack. I was inside the outhouse, and he was helping me wire the outhouse to the top of stack. I mean, two old ladies get to do that.
Hmm.
I don't know of any other old ladies that got to do that. That
No,
was
and y'all were old ladies for 4 years,
We were
right?
old ladies for 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah, our sophomore year all the way through our senior year, and you know I'd do anything for my old lady, and I know he would do anything for me. We're still really close. I mean, he lives right down the road from me,
Yeah.
and but when we got to do that, he and I were just cutting jokes. You know what happens inside the outhouse, all that kind of stuff. So he and I, he's
Right.
on the outside, and we're just joking and just having a great time for what seemed like 20 minutes, but it was every bit of like five.
Right.
Wiring the outhouse, strapping it in, and just having it was everything came to moments like that were like wow. And there, but like I said, for us, I think in that instance, for us, what created a challenge, which was really not a challenge, it was just created a little bit of, you know, us versus them type of. But eventually, the leadership at Aggie Bonfire rose above that, which was the right thing to
Right.
do, and that went away, which was the right thing to do.
No.
But it had a lasting impression. I tell you what.
Yeah. I mean, I still hear about it. I still hear about it to this day. With Joey Dollins had
Yeah,
stories about it.
yeah,
Um, last time we talked a few days ago, and I don't know how it came up.
yeah,
Of course, that came up.
yeah,
Um, but I was telling him it's weird now, and I think it's because of the commandant that we had for so many years. Up until this year, I'm guessing that it was because he was in the band as an Aggie. But in recent years, the band has apparently had more liberty than other outfits. Where other outfits report a bit of a challenge of being able to come out, the band they just show up all the time, and they'll hoof it back from uh, playing in Arlington or wherever. They'll hoof it back and they'll be there for cut, showing up before a lot of the non-rigs. And so the band is really they do really well now. But it's fun that there's still that. Yeah, but you're still a man. There's still that. It would be so boring if there wasn't
Yeah.
that adversarialism.
Yeah. But it took somebody, or it took a group of folks to cross
Mm.
over that line and inspire
Mm.
somebody or a group of leaders in the band to get them to come
Mm.
over. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
It takes leadership. It takes inspiration. It takes, get out of yourself and go do this Aggie thing. Because guess what?
Right.
The rest of us support you guys when you're doing your halftime show. You know, because that's a grand Aggie thing to do as well. And
Yeah, and I never really thought about that. Like, I've been impressed with their conduct. I think I'm going to ask them. I'm going to ask them. Why do you guys not take the excuse that you have that most other people don't? You got drill. You got, of course, the whole Corps has drill, but they've got drill to do a performance on top of everything else. And the whole cycle is week long. You finish one performance, you can't even pat yourself on the back. You're getting ready for another one. So why don't you take the excuses that you have? Because y'all have excuses all the time and you never use them.
yeah,
I'm gonna ask him that.
yeah.
So you've got all this that you did as an Aggie and all these opportunities to lead, but that wasn't the end of the road, right? You took that into a career in the Army, and Colonel, recently retired. 32 years of service, is that right? Flying MEDEVAC Chinooks, those massive helicopters, is that correct?
Well, I flew Chinooks before, and then
Uh-huh.
I transitioned into Blackhawks. And
Oh,
when I transitioned into Blackhawks, that's when I got the medevac mission. And of course,
okay, okay,
Afghanistan and Iraq were still really, really hot. And it's just like, when is this thing going to go away? And
right,
everybody was getting called to do something. And
right,
so the op tempo for military, whether you were active duty, guard, reserves, whatever, contractors, the op tempo was
mm,
very high, and folks were out managing, dual careers, and for me it was no different. It was because you had to do it, and so, but I think because of that, I'm I've always accounted for being blessed at having
mm,
opportunities, blessed at taking those opportunities and turning them into something that, number one, it wasn't just for me, it was for, yet again, one of those things that's a million times bigger than you. And of course, kind of feel like I'd already been there. You know what I mean? I'd already been through some
right,
of that grind, like we did Aggie Bonfire. I already knew what it was like to be a part, to be a small speck of pushing a log, so to speak, towards something that was much greater than us all, you know. And when 9/11 hit, it just like it it was huge. It affected us
mm,
all. I mean, it affected us all, whether you were sitting at home or you were already deployed or you were okay. Like I told my wife, when we watched it, I remember her grabbing my hand and she's like, "You're gonna go somewhere," and I just thought, well, it is what it is. We didn't start it, but we're gonna finish it,
yeah,
you know. But so, flying medevac to me just became the pinnacle of my career. Yeah, I got promoted further on down the road, but to be able to be to lead a group of folks into combat and do something that was, I thought, very humbling and noble, to be able to go pick up America's sons and daughters on the battlefield that were really, really in bad shape. That's you forget that when you were flying in to go pick them up, that there was a gunfight still going on, but you did it anyway.
Right.
And then when you picked them up, you just like, God, just give me the strength, give me the courage to fly fast and low, and to just so we can get them to the next hospital, and then go right back out and do it again.
Yeah.
I go back and I think, how the hell did we do that? But again, when it's one of those.
So how did you do it?
By the grace of God, partner. There is no other explanation. By the grace of God.
Well, similar to what, how we started, opportunity and grace and all that is not going to come to fruition unless you use it.
That's true. That's true. It became one of those, okay, now what? Because
right.
I had just done 13 months, I don't know, in Iraq. I come back. As soon as I get back, one of my old commanders says, "Hey, thanks for doing what you did, blah blah blah. Hey, oh, by the way, we want you to go. We want to send you back to school. You're going to fly another aircraft, and then, oh, by the way, you're going to be a part of this organization. We need you to get them ready for this and that and the other." And I was like, "Oh shit!" I just got home.
Right.
But is one of those, okay, so I wasn't being asked. Now it's
right.
Now it's one of those, okay, you kind of got groomed for this one, man, so now you're being ball and told. And it's one of those, what are you going to do with it? And, so, of course, my wife and I are a team, and my kids were little. And, you make decisions like that with your teammate. And so we bought in the rest of the way. And so when I tell you I'm blessed, it's an understatement. But like you mentioned, it's an opportunity. What are you going to do with it?
Right.
And so, just like being selected to be a JERP, you got an opportunity. What are you going to do with it? Whether you understand it or not, what are you going to do with it? And fortunately for me is I got to be around a group of guys that were thinking the same way I was. Oh, man, this thing is huge, but we can pull it off. Right. Yeah. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
one thing that immediately comes to mind, something that I was phobic of, had an allergy to as a young man growing up, was the perpetual chore list. The Mom, just give me the entire list of everything that you want done today. Don't wait until I'm finished with one thing and go, oh yeah, one more. I hated that, but I learned to overcome it leading Bonfire. It's just like, there's no end. There is no end to this list.
Yeah.
You're going to finish, and then that's when you're finished. And as a senior, and then your chore list is done. But even then, it's not. Griff Lasley told me in 2004, he said, what are you going to do now? I said, I'm going to sleep well at night. He says, you're never going to sleep well at night. From September through November, you're not going to sleep because you're going to know. Whatever you did is impacting today. And what can you do now? Anyway, I digress. One of the tools that in your description that immediately comes to mind, how Bonfire could have benefited, was like you say, somebody, as soon as you're done with the job, showing back up and going, hey, wait, there's more. What else do you think benefited, your service in your time at Bonfire? How did that apply later?
Trusting and verifying resonates with me because, of course, I'm not making that up. We know that it was a president that said that. But doing that a million times at Aggie Bonfire, your whole junior year, and then and you're the one running hard with no life, to include the summer after the spring that we got selected. And that summer, I just felt like we were running harder. And now it was like you were doing stuff and you were checking on yourself that you got everything done. And then you were looking left and looking right and saying, hey, old lady, did you get this done? Or he would say, hey, old lady, remember, we got to get this done. Or, my buddy Ken Levinka or Steve Moore, Ben Benton. Hey, he's up in Lubbock saying, hey, we got this going on this summer. We got that. What are we going to do? This and that and the other. And, that's what we had to do. We had to trust that we were, like you said, this endless list of tasks to get that we had to do. And then we had to verify, okay, did you get it done? And I'm telling you that I got it done, but, or that I didn't get it done. I need help in this, and that, and the other. And we hadn't even started. I mean, people had no idea what was happening in the periphery. It was the duck on a pond. And then the fall starts, and you're running hard, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, this is the start of my junior year, being in the Corps, right? It's the first year that you're like everybody else. You have privileges that are pretty close to, that freshman that walks in that's a non-reg, that can go anywhere. Right. Well, as a junior in the Corps, that's really your first year that you have the privileges to do pretty much whatever. And yet you don't really get to do that because you're running hard at doing this Aggie Bonfire thing. Trusting and verifying to me was a checks and balances. So taking that further into our careers post our time at A&M, it always stuck with me. And then now you're having to do it with guys that Vietnam veterans, and they're still serving. But now they're serving under this lowly lieutenant that knows nothing. But you're leaning on them, and they're looking to you, and they're testing you to see if, okay, man, all right, kid, you got what it takes? Let's see. Because I don't think you do. You're so wet behind the ears, and then, you're the first one there, and you're the last one to leave, and they're looking at you like, okay, all right, well, maybe you do have some promise. So you're constantly proving yourself. And then next thing you know, the balloon goes up, 9/11 hits, and it's all bets are off. Now everybody's running hard. But you're still trusting that, you got this laundry list of things that you got to get done, and you're constantly leaning over to the left and to the right and saying, okay, guys, are we getting this done? Because if we don't get it done, this bonfire doesn't get built.
Yeah. Well, and what people end up seeing by the fall in their junior red pots, from the outside looking at your leaders, can come across as I don't want to say, well, let's just say confident. it looks a lot like confidence. It looks a lot like somebody who's in charge, who is making the rules, and looks like leadership and in its highest form. And look, they're on a pedestal. But in reality, it's this intense humility that you learn, that you can't look at your buddies and say, I'm not going to trouble you with this thing that I'm having a hard time with. I've got this thing that I got to get done by the end of the week. I said I would do it, but I'm having a hard time. But you've got stuff too, so I'm going to keep this to myself. You learn very quickly that to recruit other people to help you solve a problem is dignified. To accept to yourself that you don't have the ability to get everything done all by yourself, that success and failure is the product of a team being honest with each other. That is an intense bit of humility that everybody has to adopt and make part of who they are in order to have that opportunity to be on top and to lead. And, I never thought of it as you framed it, but it's trusting but verifying, and applying that first to yourself, then learning to recruit your peers and being part of that process. And then in the fall, applying that to the people who report to you. It's a tremendous evolution.
Yeah. What to me, I guess as juniors, one of the folks that was I thought he was charismatic. I thought he was charismatic because he was very genuine. Steve Saunders. Truck. Okay. Yeah, it was Jimmy's dad. And, big old dude. And, to me, I always thought, I love all my buddies, right? And him, I hit it off with him early on because he just seemed so genuine. And he was one of those that, dude, you got to tone it down. You're going at this whole thing. And he's, of course, a non-reg, right? And, you're just like, you're trying to get this thing done and whatever he tells me. He said, dude, you gotta stop being so intense. You got to tone it down because they don't, you notice how people aren't, and I was like, shit. Thankfully, I heard that from somebody that I trusted. And right. Saw something that, the reason why they're not reacting is because and I was like, damn, I didn't think of it that way. He says, these guys aren't in the Corps, man. They're non-regs. So anyway, it's one of those, you go back and you look at different segments of folks that you had to figure out a way to relate. And once you relate, once you're relatable, then you can, hey guys, here's what I'm need to get this done, this and that and the other. And that carries, throughout, our careers, folks that are able to do that. And it's not easy, but folks that are able to do that, I think are the ones that people will follow off the edge of the earth.
Right. True. And, and then there's always room when you know that you have a wheelhouse and you had to step outside of your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
To do and behave in a manner that was different. You know that you've always got home base to go back to.
Yeah.
And then your peer knows that, you know what, okay, being nice isn't working anymore. Carlos, get over here. Nice isn't working. Mean is your wheelhouse. Get over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had that. My nice guy was Matt Belsick. He was my nice buddy. But I want to say this and hope that it gets recorded. I met you first in person in 2015 at Burn Night of 2015. And in 2014, after years of thinking about it and what have you, TexAgs had set up a live stream where they put a camera up on top of bus 12. And then they just turned the camera on, and that was the live stream. And that went so well, and people loved that so much that in 2015, they said, well, let's just do a whole show, a whole production. And we'll have guests, and we'll have a host, and Gabe was the host. And then, before, I guess while they were still planning, it was like a month or two before Burn, Gabe called and he said, hey, Dion, hey, listen, we're going to do this big production. I'm going to be the play-by-play. We're looking for sort of a color commentator. Do you know anybody? And I was like, yeah, I'll find somebody. I'll figure it out. I'll get that for you. No problem. And we get off the phone like 5 minutes later. Gabe calls and he's like, okay, I don't think I phrased that question right. Can you be the color guy? All right. So I'll be the color guy, but I better be able to take pictures. Like, y'all better cut me loose. So here I am. I'm going to host this thing. Co-host, whatever. Try not to screw it up. We get 4 guests: Jim McTasney, Coach Jackie Sherrill, a member of the 12th Man Kickoff Team, and the head of Habitat for Humanity, who built houses on some land that Bonfire came to clear for them that fall. They had a piece right off of 2818 or something. In any event, the Habitat for Humanity guy can't make it at the last minute. He gets sick. So then TexAgs is flipping out, reasonably so, because they've got a 15-minute segment now that they can't fill because we're missing one of the guests. And they said, what do we do? I said, I don't know, I'll figure it out. And I talked to like 2 or 3 people. What do we do? And they went, Carlos Tamez is here. And so I met you in Perimeter in 2015 saying, Carlos, Dion, good to meet you. Anyway, can you work tonight? And then you jumped in and did. And you jumped on stage having no prompting, no planning.
I remember that.
No nothing. Yeah. And did 15 minutes on Bonfire. So thank you for that. That worked.
Yeah, absolutely. I
got to tell you, they were.
I remember that. I hadn't remembered it, but I remember it now because, yeah, that was
put
crazy.
You on the spot. They were floored. When I took off to go find somebody, first of all, they were like, "Oh my God, we're missing one of our guests, and now our co-host is gone, and I don't know if he's ever going to make it back." Because they know me. I'm going to see somebody 30 minutes later. I'm going to be talking to him still, and I'm going to go, "Oh wait, that's right." And then come back, and there you are, filling a spot. How did that work? How did you do that? I was like, I was a Bonfire. I don't know. You're always ready to jump in.
That's true, man. That's true. I think
with a caveat. What are you going to say?
No. I saw Dirk Perdue. And Dirk looking at me, he had that kind of look. And then McTasney, I saw him and I was like, okay, what's going on here? And, I guess you guys were already looking. And then Dirk looks at me and he says, like, so you're the one, huh? And I was like, what? And he says, yeah, they need your help. And I was like, what are you talking about? I just got here, dude. I was looking for my kids because they were. My wife had them, and we're walking through Perimeter, and and then Dirk's like, "Oh, yeah," but yeah, I forgot about that night. That was crazy.
It was good, and the caveat I realized there, you're always ready to jump in. You learn that. Always be prepared to jump in and do a job, or also always be prepared to throw your buddy in.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, Carlos, I've enjoyed it. I know there's a lot of stuff that we haven't talked about that we can talk about. As has been the case with everybody so far, I think we plan on talking some more. Um, once you start talking, you start digging stuff up, and I know we're both going to say, "Oh, hey, we forgot to talk about that." So, I hope we can do this again soon. Continue trains of thought. Certainly, at some point I'm going to talk to Jimmy. On the record, I think he's just trying to make sure he gets his ducks in a row, so he doesn't put anything on the record that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But we'll kick some stuff up, and I've certainly enjoyed it. This has been great. I thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for reaching out, Dion, and you know, hopefully we can do this soon. Do it again. We were all fortunate to have been around each other. That's for darn sure.